Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Wiping Up the Pooh. Please welcome CPAC board member Gordon Chang and senior editor at Epoch Times, Jekielek.
Thank you. Jan, it's so great to be talking to you. You know, today the news is all about Taiwan, but at this moment, China is pressuring India, the Philippines, Japan. There's this campaign to challenge planes in airspace. What is going on?
Well, it's a big question, isn't it? And well, first of all, I just want to say it's fantastic to be up here on stage with you, Gordon. I've been watching your work for decades, literally, so it's great to be here.
Thank you.
Of course, it's very serious, but I think it's serious in a way that most people may not realize. Xi Jinping is in a very difficult situation right now. He faces possibly the biggest recession, economic problems within China that he's faced in recent times. And he's in this situation where he's had to lock down a significant portion of the country, which exacerbated that. And he couldn't back down because it was his policy that supposedly solved the COVID problem for them, okay? Now, he has to project strength. We have Speaker Nancy Pelosi, which, by the way, I support very much her going to Taiwan because it's basically saying, we're going to do this. We're going to say that we stand with Taiwan, right? He has to show the world with Taiwan that basically he's in charge. But he actually has to show internally his entire populace that he's good. He's good on India. He's good across the whole region. He's good in the South China Sea. And of course, he's good on Taiwan. And then you have these live fire drills that are happening right now.
So what you're saying is that internal problems are making China even more belligerent than it normally would be.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the first thing. Like Xi Jinping, number one, is actually afraid of the Chinese people more so than any other group.
Okay. I asked the Twitterverse, what would they like to hear from Jan? And I'll ask the question from Todd L. Griffith, who is at Chief Tome. He asks, was the CCP virus, because you talked about COVID, so he asks, was the CCP virus released from the Wuhan lab intentionally or accidentally, and why?
That is an excellent question, and this is a question, of course, that we've been, at Epoch Times, we've been trying to figure out, you know, in multiple attempts in the documentary and many research articles. I don't think that's the biggest question. I mean, I'm going to kind of avoid the question a little bit here. Because irrespective of whether it was released intentionally or unintentionally, the CCP facilitated the spread of this virus to the whole world. They locked down internally, they prevented the spread internally, and at the same time, they protested like crazy when anyone would suggest that they should stop, you know, basically people flying out of Wuhan. So, in essence, and there's lots of evidence, they actually kind of, you know, made it happen intentionally.
And they also lied about contagiousness. They told the world this disease was not human-to-human transmissible when they knew that it was. So if you put the thing that you just mentioned, that they were locking down their own country, but they were protesting when other countries were putting in restrictions, and they were lying, that looks like they wanted to intentionally spread this disease beyond China's borders. And that means that 1,030,000 Americans, according to Johns Hopkins, were murdered. Your comment?
You know, people ask this question, is it a bioweapon, right? It doesn't need to have been engineered to be a bioweapon. It could be a mistake. It could be vaccine research gone wrong. But it became a bioweapon when it was used the way it was used.
Okay, let's go to another question we got from the Twitterverse. This from Bill Chow. What is the state of religious freedom in China?
Um, well, first of all, officially, I think, that's a great question. China is the most a-religious, ostensibly the most a-religious country in the world, which is saying something. At the same time, there's a lot of religion, well, we could say underground. Of course, we have, one of the largest would be the Falun Gong practitioners. This is a group that is suppressed incredibly in China, but at the same time has been growing quietly, beneath the radar, so to speak, of the authorities. And they still clamp it down, of course, horribly whenever they see it. I think there's an estimate of something like 20 million people are practicing it actively in China. We have Christianity, that lots of house churches. I mean, frankly, there's an official Catholic church and there's an underground Catholic church. And I don't frankly understand how the official Catholic Church works exactly when the CCP authorizes the bishops there. So there is an element of official religion as well. But I think what's most interesting is that, basically in this very a-religious country where religion is specifically crushed, like another example would be, of course, Tibet and Xinjiang, both places where these ethnic groups and the faiths associated with them are being eradicated actively.
So it's more than just a-religious, it's actually anti-religious. And it's not just the Falun Gong, it's Protestants, it's Catholics, it's Buddhists, it's everybody, right?
Correct.
Okay, when you think about that, it's the Communist Party is worried about the Chinese people. They're worried about religion. They're worried about people who are not religious. But it seems to me that we have got a regime that is just concerned about everybody. Remember, the title of this program is Wiping the Pooh. That's a reference to Winnie the Pooh, because Winnie the Pooh is now banned in China. Peppa Pig, of all characters, is also banned in China. That shows an insecure regime.
Humor is a fantastic way to basically test the security of any regime, frankly, isn't it?
And that goes to your first point, which was the reason why China is so belligerent right now is because the Communist Party is so afraid of the Chinese people.
Absolutely. No, and it's interesting, like your point about faith, they're particularly insecure about faith because faith says that there is, something more important. There's someone more important that you pledge your allegiance to other than the Communist Party. God first, perhaps, or Christianity. And the CCP doesn't like that. The CCP wants itself to be seen that way.
So we have the communist regime, and not only is it persecuting Christians and Falun Gong and everybody else, it's committing genocide and crimes against humanity, forced abortions, forced sterilization, infanticide, official rape, all the rest of it. You have talked in the past to people that how can the United States maintain relationships with such a horrible regime, perhaps the worst in history?
This is just a bizarre question. I keep asking it both publicly and privately. We know everyone agrees, there's bipartisan consensus, and many countries around the world agree that at least one group in China is being actively eradicated for the purpose of destroying them, right? This is, of course, the Uyghurs of Xinjiang province, right? And we could easily argue there's multiple other groups as well. So how can you expect that you will have normal, reasonable, fair business relations with a regime that is doing that, which is the worst crime that humans can do, we're agreed on, right? I don't understand the logic.
Yeah, and yet we trade with them, we invest with them, we give them technical information like how to make coronaviruses more dangerous to humanity. Thank you, Dr. Fauci. We do all of this stuff, and yet it doesn't seem like we've got a president who wants to stop this.
I think the biggest thing that we've learned, I hope we've learned, right, is that America needs to project strength, right? This visit, for example, right, that the Speaker Pelosi did, that it was a sign. The CCP reacted in all sorts of ways, sanctioned her, all these rules that we now have to respond to, right? Because again, suddenly, someone's losing face.
You know, one of the things that Beijing did, and it was yesterday, was they cut off mill-to-mill cooperation. They cut off cooperation on climate change. They cut off cooperation on fentanyl. It seems to me that's good for us. We don't need to be talking to those bastards.
I was having the same thought. You know, this engagement around many of these issues isn't really helpful. Like on climate change, I mean, it's comedic. The rate at which China is basically building its coal-fired plants, for example, electric plants. It's silly. It's just simply subterfuge.
Okay, now for another question from the Twitterverse. Michael Bales asks, how do we stop infiltration of American society? He's specifically worried about the Confucius Institutes on our college campuses, Confucius classrooms in our secondary schools, but he asks, Jan, what do we do about this?
I think this is an incredibly difficult question, right? Because we're an open society, and the CCP actually takes advantage of this. We can't just say, well, okay, we're not going to let anyone in, right?
Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we can do that. Anyway.
I feel like we have to come up with ways of, we have to be very, very careful at screening people coming in from China, because every single person that's coming in from China is some way going to be co-opted by the CCP. They're going to have family back there. They can pressure them, right? Some of them will be ideologically aligned, some of them won't, but even then, they have lots of leverage on these people. So I'm not for, you know, putting a wall down and not letting anybody in, but I am for screening extremely carefully and not treating it as some other free country where people have their lives are their own, basically.
Jan, we know that the Communist Party, once they come into the U.S., once they get their students on college campuses, once they get their banks in our country, they use every point of contact to bring down America. And right now, our FBI is overwhelmed, our local law enforcement's overwhelmed, our academics are overwhelmed, everybody is. And so we've got a crisis, don't we?
Basically, we've been in this situation for many decades where we've essentially been conceding to what the CCP has wanted, right? And so we simply have to, we saw moments ago, you know, basically various people talking about America first. This is an incredibly important policy. It hasn't been America first with respect to China. It's often been the Chinese Communist Party first.
You know, you look at Biden's policies, and it looks like many times they're China first, America last. You know, Biden's been the best friend of the Chinese worker. He hasn't been so kind to our workers.
I think we need to put the American worker first, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Hands down. As many have said, right, the American manufacturing has been gutted over decades, and it's been shipped over to the other side. And the biggest problem is there's still very, very deep financial relationships that keep those, basically that system in play, and that's the most important thing.
And we got to end those relationships, and we got to end this session because we've run out of time. But before we do, I want to tell you a story. This Thursday night, in these halls, a patriot came to me and gave me this hat. And this hat says, 1 of 74 million. Now, that's, of course, a reference to the election, the number of votes that Trump got, and I'm sure all of you are one of the 74 million. This hat was not made by some professionally managed election campaign. It was not made by some company that wants to make a buck. This hat was made by that woman's brother, who was sick and tired, who said, I've had enough, I'm going to do something about it. So he made 300 hats. He gave one to his sister gave it to me. And that tells me why we're a strong society, because each of us are doing our part to save our country. And by the way, our backs are against the wall. We don't have any place else to go. This is our country. We cannot flee the United States of America. But we do not have a president who wants to defend us or who can defend us, and the Chinese are coming after us really hard. So let Joe Biden hear us. Let the Chinese hear us. We are the United States of America. Let me hear you chant it. USA! 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 God bless all of you. God bless the United States of America. And let's go from here and take back our country. Thank you.